I wanted to be like an English tea party kind of thing, so like with little teacups and tea cakes and stuff.
Alice in Wonderland theme.
Yeah, maybe Alice in Wonderland theme, yeah. That would be funny.
You can be the Mad Hatter because your hair is crazy.
1. Safaa Boular. It was August 12th, 2016. A quiet Saturday morning at London Stansted Airport. Safaa Boular, just 16 years old, stood in the security line ready to board a flight to Istanbul. She wasn't planning a vacation. She was planning to join ISIS. Safaa had been radicalized at age 12, watching extremist videos online. By 14, she was deeply embedded in ISIS propaganda. By 16, she had fallen in love with a man she'd never met, Naweed Hussein, a British jihadi fighting in Syria. They communicated through encrypted apps and even had an Islamic marriage ceremony over the phone. She called him her husband. He called her his soldier. But British intelligence was watching. When Safaa arrived at Stansted, officers stopped her before she could board. They searched her belongings and sent her home. Most teenagers would have been terrified. But Safaa was furious. So she changed her plan. If she couldn't join ISIS in Syria, she'd bring ISIS to London. Using a hidden phone, she contacted Naweed and began planning an attack on the British Museum. The plan was to throw grenades into the crowds. They discussed it in code, calling grenades pineapples. But in April 2017, Naweed was killed in a drone strike. 8 days later, police arrested Safaa. They found the hidden phone. They found the encrypted messages. They found everything. During the investigation, detectives uncovered even more. Safaa's mother and older sister, Rislane, had helped plan a backup attack. The three women had shopped for knives, scouted Westminster, and discussed attacking police officers. They even joked about it in messages, calling their plans a Mad Hatter's Tea Party. On August 3rd, 2018, Safaa was convicted of preparing acts of terrorism. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 13 years, later reduced to 11. Her sister Rislane received 16 years. Together, they became Britain's first all-female ISIS terror cell. Safaa was just 17 years old. 2. Kriesha Beyonce Stroud. It was January 30th, 2025, just days ago, when 15-year-old Kriesha Beyonce Stroud stood in a Newcastle courtroom and heard her sentence, life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. She had just become one of Britain's youngest murderers, convicted of orchestrating a brutal killing over a dispute about a dog. Kriesha's childhood had been stolen long before the murder. She started smoking cannabis at age 8. By 15, she was deep into drugs and violence in Walker, Newcastle. She had no supervision, no boundaries, and no future. She once told social workers she'd had no childhood at all. On April 27th, 2024, Kriesha decided someone had to die. The target was Gary Belfield, a 40-year-old father of 6 who worked as an Amazon driver. The motive was petty, a disagreement over a dog. But Kriesha didn't just want revenge, she wanted him dead. So, she recruited two 17-year-old boys, Leandro Lopes and Jordan Tams, to carry out the attack. On that spring evening, the three burst into Gary's flat, armed with a knife and a screwdriver. They found Gary inside with his son, Luke. The attack was vicious. Gary was stabbed 11 times. Luke tried to fight back but was slashed across the face. He managed to escape to the garage and survived. Gary did not. After the murder, Kriesha bragged that she'd watched the whole thing through the window, but investigators quickly proved she was lying. The window had a blind. She hadn't watched anything. She was just trying to sound tough. Police arrested all three within days. The evidence was overwhelming. On January 30th, 2025, Kriesha was sentenced to life with a minimum of 20 years. Lopes and Tams each received 26 years. Gary's son, Luke, who survived the attack, spoke in court. He said no amount of time would ever be enough for these monsters. Gary left behind 6 children, a devastated family, and a community that will never forget what a 15-year-old girl was capable of orchestrating. 3. Lorraine Thorpe. Lorraine Thorpe was born in 1994 in Ipswich, England. into a life most people can't imagine. Her father, Desmond, was a disabled alcoholic who could barely take care of himself. They moved from one squalid flat to another, sometimes living in tents. Lorraine stopped going to school at age 13. She had ADHD, no education, and no future. The only people she knew were homeless, alcoholics, and criminals. By 15, Lorraine had fallen in with Paul Clark, a 41-year-old ex-soldier who was just as lost as she was. Together, they spiraled into drugs, violence, and cruelty. And in August 2009, they committed 2 murders that shocked the nation. The first victim was Rosalind Hunt, a 41-year-old woman from the street drinking community. On August 9, 2009, Lorraine and Paul lured Rosalind to a flat and tortured her for days. They kicked her, punched her, stomped on her head. They used cheese graters on her face. They wrapped her in dog chains and poured salt into her wounds. The abuse was so loud that police were called during the torture. But they closed the case prematurely, assuming it was just a noise complaint. Rosalind died alone in agony. 9 days later, Lorraine turned on her own father. Desmond Thorpe, the man who had failed her in every way, became her second victim. She smothered him with a cushion, then kicked his lifeless body. Later, she told the police, "You'll find my footprint on my dad." At trial in August 2010, Lorraine showed no remorse. She laughed and giggled throughout. She told the court that the violence had been funny and entertaining. The jury was horrified. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 14 years. Paul Clark received 27 years. In October 2023, Lorraine was denied parole. Officials said she remained a high risk and hadn't engaged with rehabilitation programs. She is still in prison today, Britain's youngest female double murderer. 4. Kim Edwards. Kim Edwards was 14 years old when she decided her mother and sister had to die. She had a troubled relationship with her mother, Elizabeth, and felt that her 13-year-old sister, Katie, was the favorite child. When Kim was 8, her mother hit her during an argument, and both girls were temporarily placed in foster care. By 14, Kim had been sent to a school for children with behavioral difficulties. That's where she met Lucas Markham, also 14, who would do anything she asked. On April 13, 2016, in the quiet town of Spalding, Lincolnshire, Kim gave Lucas the order. That night, Lucas climbed through the bathroom window carrying 2 kitchen knives. His first target was Elizabeth Edwards, a 49-year-old dinner lady. He stabbed her in the neck 10 times, then smothered her with a pillow. Elizabeth fought for her life, scratching and struggling for 3 minutes before she stopped moving. Then, Lucas went to Katie's room. The 13-year-old was asleep when he stabbed her through the throat and smothered her with a pillow. She died in her bed. But what happened next shocked investigators even more. Kim and Lucas didn't run. They didn't panic. They didn't call for help. Instead, they took a bath together, had sex, and settled in to watch movies. For the next 36 hours, while the bodies lay upstairs, the couple calmly watched all 4 Twilight films and ate ice cream. When police finally arrived, they found Kim and Lucas sitting on the couch watching TV like nothing had happened. At trial in November 2016, both were convicted of murder. The judge called the case exceptional due to the meticulous planning and cold, calculated nature of the killings. Kim and Lucas were each sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years later, reduced to 17.5 years. The media dubbed them the Twilight Killers. Kim was just 14 when she orchestrated the deaths of her own family. 5. Girl D and Girl F. Girl D was 14. Girl F was 13. Their names can never be revealed due to lifelong anonymity orders, but what they did to Angela Wrightson on December 8, 2014 in Hartlepool will never be forgotten. Both girls had spent their entire lives in the care system. They had histories of underage drinking, drug use, and violence. Just 2 months before the murder, Girl D had been arrested for assaulting care workers. But nothing in their troubled pasts prepared anyone for what they were capable of. Angela Wrightson was a vulnerable 39-year-old woman who weighed just 6.5 stone and stood 5'4". She was an alcoholic who lived alone and was desperately lonely. Local teenagers knew they could exploit her. They'd ask her to buy them alcohol and cigarettes, and she'd do it, hoping they'd stay and keep her company. All she wanted was to not be alone. On that December night, the two girls ordered Angela to buy them cigarettes and cider. She did, hoping they'd be her friends. But once inside her home, the girls didn't leave. They stayed for 7 hours, and they tortured her. They beat her with a shovel, a TV, a coffee table, and a wooden stick studded with screws. They kicked her, punched her, and stomped on her head. When it was over, Angela had more than 100 injuries, with 80 on her face alone. But here's the shocking part. At 11 p.m., the girls paused to visit a friend. Then, at 2 a.m., they came back and continued. During the torture, they posted selfies on Snapchat. One photo showed them smiling while Angela lay injured in the background. After leaving her semi-conscious or dead on the couch, they called 911 to ask for a ride home. In the police van, they took another selfie with the caption, "In the back busy van again." Angela's only crime was being kind to people who didn't deserve it. In April 2016, both girls were convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years each. In February 2021, they were granted lifelong anonymity. They remain in prison today, serving time for one of the most sadistic crimes committed by children in British history. 6. Sharon Carr. Sharon Carr was born in Belize in 1979 and moved to England as a young child. Her childhood was marked by violence and disturbing behavior. She once witnessed her mother pour boiling water on her stepfather. Her family practiced voodoo rituals that included torturing and killing animals. At age 11, Sharon decapitated a neighbor's dog with a spade. She smoked cannabis, showed a fascination with violence, and nobody stopped her. On June 7, 1992, 18-year-old Katie Ratcliffe was walking home from Ragamuffins nightclub in Camberley. Katie was an apprentice hairdresser with dreams of opening her own salon. She had her whole life ahead of her. But that night, she crossed paths with 12-year-old Sharon Carr. Sharon approached Katie in an alley. They were complete strangers. Without warning, Sharon pulled out a 6.5-inch knife and stabbed Katie 32 times. The attack was sexually motivated. Sharon mutilated Katie's genitals and left her partially naked body in the alley. When Sharon went home that night, she wrote in her diary, "Her terrified screams turned me on." Then she added, "I'm a killer. Killing is my business, and business is good." Police found Katie's body and assumed the killer was an adult male due to the brutality. Sharon wasn't caught for 4 years. Then, on June 7th, 1994, exactly 2 years after Katie's murder, Sharon attacked another schoolgirl. This time, she was arrested. In prison, Sharon couldn't keep quiet. She bragged to inmates about what she'd done. She wrote in her diaries, "If only I could kill you again, I promise I would make you suffer more." Another entry read, "I swear I was born to be a murderer." In March 1997, Sharon was convicted of Katie's murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 14 years. But Sharon has never been released. She's been denied parole multiple times, most recently in 2020 after she was caught fantasizing about murdering another inmate. She remains in prison today, more than 30 years after killing Katie Ratcliffe. The community was horrified that a 12-year-old girl could commit such a sexually violent crime. Sharon Carr, known as the Devil's Daughter, is now 45 years old and still behind bars. 7. Paris Mayo. Paris Mayo was 15 years old and living in Ross-on-Wye, Herefordshire, when she gave birth alone in her living room on March 23, 2019. Her father, Patrick, was disabled and on dialysis. Their relationship was strained. Paris later described him as emotionally cruel. She had hidden her pregnancy from everyone. The baby, a boy she named Stanley Mayo, was born healthy, weighing 7 pounds 12 ounces. He was full term. He cried. He breathed. He was alive. But Paris didn't want him to be. Within moments of giving birth, Paris crushed Stanley's skull, likely with her foot. But he kept breathing, so she stuffed 5 cotton wool balls into his mouth, pushing 2 deep into his throat. Then she pinched his nose shut and held it until he stopped moving. Stanley had lived for a little over 2 hours before his mother suffocated him. After killing her newborn son, Paris wrapped his body in a black bin bag and placed it on the doorstep. She sent a message to her brother telling him to put it in the bin. Then she went to bed. The next morning, her mother discovered the bag and found Stanley's body inside. Police arrested Paris immediately. The investigation revealed the horrifying details of what she had done. Stanley's death was not accidental, it was deliberate, prolonged, and cruel. 10 days after Stanley was born, Paris's father, Patrick, died. At trial in June 2023, Paris was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with a minimum of 12 years. The court heard that Paris had acted alone, that she had panicked after giving birth, and that she had made a series of choices that ended in her child's death. Paris Mayo is currently serving her sentence. She will be eligible for parole when she is 27 years old. Stanley Mayo's death remains one of the most heartbreaking cases of infanticide in recent British history. He was alive for just over 2 hours, and his mother made sure he didn't survive. 8. Scarlett Jenkinson. Scarlett Jenkinson was 15 years old when she murdered Brianna Ghey, a 16-year-old transgender TikToker, on February 11, 2023, in Culcheth Linear Park. The case shocked the nation, not just because of the brutality, but because of how meticulously Scarlett had planned it. Scarlett had a severe conduct dissocial disorder and was obsessed with violence, torture, and serial killers. She spent hours watching murder videos on the dark web. She kept detailed notes about famous killers and fantasized about committing her own crimes. Her co-defendant, Eddie Ratcliffe, who was also 15, shared her dark interests. Brianna Ghey was a vulnerable teenager with autism and ADHD. She had faced relentless transphobic bullying at school and online. She was isolated, struggling, and desperate for friendship. Scarlett saw that vulnerability and used it. She befriended Brianna not out of kindness, but to get close enough to kill her. For months, Scarlett and Eddie exchanged hundreds of WhatsApp messages planning the murder. They created a kill list with multiple names, but Brianna was their chosen target. On the day of the murder, Scarlett lured Brianna to the park under the pretense of hanging out. Brianna sent her last message at 2:30 p.m., telling a friend, "Scarlett is so weird, girl. I think she's pretending to have a dealer." Once they reached a secluded area, Eddie attacked. He stabbed Brianna 28 times in the head, neck, chest, and back. Brianna fought for her life, but didn't survive. Her body was found by dog walkers shortly after. The community was devastated. Police quickly identified Scarlett and Eddie as suspects. During the investigation, they uncovered the disturbing messages, the kill list, and the sadistic planning. The murder was partially motivated by transphobia, but it was also driven by Scarlett's desire to experience killing. On December 20th, 2023, both were convicted of murder. On February 2nd, 2024, Scarlett was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 22 years. Eddie received 20 years. Scarlett will be eligible for parole on January 25th, 2044, when she will be 37 years old. She remains one of the youngest girls ever convicted of such a sadistic, premeditated murder in British history. 9. Jordan Jobson. Jordan Jobson was 15 years old when she killed 18-year-old Samantha Madgin on August 2nd, 2007. The two had never met before that night. They were complete strangers, but in a drunken, drug-fueled rage, Jordan ended Samantha's life over nothing. Samantha Madgin was a new mother with a 10-week-old son named Callum. The night of August 2nd was her first night out since giving birth. She was excited to have a break, to feel normal again, and to spend time with friends. But that night turned into a nightmare. Jordan, drunk on vodka and lager and high on cocaine, was involved in a street fight when Samantha walked by. Samantha tried to break up the fight, trying to calm the situation. But Jordan, desperate to look tough in front of an older crowd, turned on her. Without warning, Jordan pulled out a knife and attacked. She stabbed Samantha 10 times. In total, Samantha suffered 43 injuries. The knife pierced her lung and severed an artery. Samantha collapsed in the alleyway and bled to death. She never made it home to her baby. Police arrested Jordan shortly after. The evidence was overwhelming. At trial in 2008, Jordan was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years. That sentence was later reduced to 12 years and then to 11 years. In December 2020, Jordan was released from prison, but just 5 months later, in May 2021, she was recalled to prison for violating the terms of her license. She remains behind bars today. After Samantha's death, her family founded an organization called Samantha's Legacy in 2019 to educate young people about the dangers of knife crime. In recognition of their work, King Charles awarded the family MBEs. But no award, no sentence, and no amount of time will ever bring Samantha back. Jordan Jobson killed a young mother over nothing. Samantha's son, Callum, grew up without his mother. And Jordan, she threw away her life for a moment of senseless violence. That concludes all 9 cases of dangerous teenage girls currently serving life sentences in UK prisons. From terrorism to torture, from infanticide to murder, these girls committed crimes that shocked the nation and destroyed countless lives. Some were driven by ideology, others by rage, and some by pure sadism. But all of them made choices that ended in tragedy. Which case shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, share and subscribe for more true crime content covering the darkest cases from around the world.